Greetings, vinyl community. It's time for another episode of Vinyl Show and Tell. So today I will be focusing on the 1968 self-titled debut album by The Soft Machine. This is my original copy of this album. I picked this up at the Thrifty Drugstore in San Diego. You can see that it's a cutout copy from those thrifty cutout bins. Found this in 1971. Having actually had my interest in the band sparked by reading a review in Rolling Stone at the end of 1970, a review of their third album, titled Third. This was the first recording of theirs that I encountered, so this was my first exposure to the band. And this is on the Probe label, with both ABC and Command logos associated, so this is like a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary. Soft Machine grew out of the band from Canterbury, England, called the Wildflowers. The Wildflowers were the root of the whole Canterbury prog rock scene that grew up around Soft Machine and Caravan, both bands that spun off from the Wildflowers. And as originally constituted, Soft Machine consisted of David Allen on guitar, Mike Ratledge on keyboards, Kevin Ayers on bass, and Robert Wyatt on drums and lead vocals. Thus constituted, they recorded a single on Polydor with Kim Fowley producing. They also did a set of demos for Giorgio Gomelski. Those went unreleased at the time. And after doing some gigs in France, David Allen was refused re-entry into Great Britain. He was the one member of the band who wasn't English by birth. He was from Australia and was considered a naughty boy, so he stayed behind in France and formed Gong, while Mike Ratledge, Robert Wyatt, and Kevin Ayers continued as a trio. As the trio, they shared management with Jimi Hendrix, and so they landed the gig of supporting Hendrix on his 1968 American tour. And during gaps in the tour, they would be based in New York City, and at the end of the tour, they got some time at the record plant in New York City to record this album. It was actually time that was block booked for Jimi Hendrix that Hendrix wasn't using, so they got to squeeze in for 4 days of that studio time. The album begins with Hope for Happiness, and this is written by Brian Hopper. Brian Hopper and his brother Hugh were members of the Wildflowers. Hugh Hopper was actually the Soft Machine's roadie on the Jimi Hendrix tour, and would become a regular member of the Soft Machine with their second album as their bass player, replacing Kevin Ayers. Brian Hopper had written this as a sort of raga tune, and here it's adapted with co-writing credit for Kevin Ayers and Mike Ratledge as a psychedelic piece with two Robert Wyatt vocal lines intertwining around each other, sort of dancing, vocal lines dancing around each other and floating very freely until finally it snaps into a fast rock rhythm. This gives way to the Kevin Ayers composition Joy of a Toy, co-written here with Mike Ratledge, an instrumental with a very interesting, to me, underwater-like sound. The lead melody is played on the bass with a wah-wah pedal, which somehow sounds very aquatic to me, and it's punctuated by rim shots from Robert Wyatt's drums, which are echoed, and it's sort of like hearing sonar pings. This leads into a reprise of Hope for Happiness, and that's followed by Why Am I So Short? Credited to Hugh Hopper, Kevin Ayers, and Mike Ratledge, this is actually an adaptation of a song called I Should Have Known that was one of the Gomelski demos. Strangely enough, Robert Wyatt is not credited on this album. He obviously wrote the lyrics to this version. They are very much in his personal style, and there's no doubt about who came up with lines like, I'm nearly 5'7" tall. I like to smoke and drink and ball. I've got a yellow suit that's made by Pam, and every day I like an egg and some tea. But best of all, I like to talk about me. This goes into an instrumental jammy piece with the unusual title, So Boot If It All, and ends with a reprise of the chorus of Why Am I So Short? And finally, and this is all continuous. This is all segueing together. It's recorded as if the whole side were a continuous performance. So the reprise of Why Am I So Short blends right into a very delicate tune called A Certain Kind, soulful vocals from Robert Wyatt. Wyatt's voice is very high-pitched and raspy. The sound of the band does tend to center around the higher frequencies in this incarnation. The organ sound from Mike Ratledge, and Ratledge does play almost exclusively organ on this album. It tends to be very shrill. It's a Lowry organ, not the big sound of a Hammond. It's the more shrill sound of a combo organ. A Certain Kind, he does contrive to get a more church-like sound out of that organ. The piece ends with a quote of the Earl of Salisbury, a pavan by the 17th century British composer William Byrd. And we flip the album over and begin with a Robert Wyatt composition, Save Yourself, another leftover from the Gomelski demo period. It's not the same recording, but it's a song that they recorded for those demos. And then we go into another instrumental bridging piece called Priscilla. And the next song section is a Kevin Ayers composition. Robert Wyatt still singing, however. Lullaby Letter. Very nice little catchy poppy song that does break into another free-form floating section with sort of meandering vocals from Robert Wyatt sounding very, very urchin-like. And this leads into one of the band's specialties from their stage show, We Did It Again, which is basically a chant. On this album, it's 3 minutes 40, and it basically consists of the band repeating, I did it again, I did it again, I did it again, I did it again, with unison vocals by Robert Wyatt and Kevin Ayers. Apparently on stage, this could be half an hour of repeating that line. And that was their sort of Zen meditation statement for their live set. Another instrumental section, Plus belle qu'une poubelle, or in English, More Beautiful Than a Trash Can, credited to Ayers again. And finally, Ayers' sort of signature number from this album, with Kevin Ayers doing the lead vocal, Why Are We Sleeping? Very haunting piece with great contrast in the vocal sound. As mentioned, Robert Wyatt has the high, raspy voice, and Kevin Ayers has a deep, sort of Leonard Cohen-like sound. The album winds up with Box 25 for Lid, very brief instrumental consisting of a strange theme played in unison on piano and bass by Mike Ratledge and Hugh Hopper. Hugh Hopper, I forgot to mention, was also the composer of A Certain Kind, so he had a lot to do with this album, even though he was not yet an official member of the band. So that's it. Soft Machine's first album. Thank you very much for watching. Be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.